Welcome back into the Sports Source. This segment of our program brought to you by Phil Cobble Fine Homes and Land. If you are looking to sell your home, be sure to sell it for the maximum value. Call Phil and talk to him about upgrades and possible repairs your home may need before you even put it on the market. He may even help with the cost of that. You see their marketing prowess, man. He's got it. List, sell, or purchase. You've got Phil Cobble Fine Homes and Land. You can see the sales numbers for yourself. Good stuff. Call Phil this week. All right. Earlier this month, Tennessee settled its Title IX lawsuit, as some had suggested and predicted over the past few months. Who got what right? We were ahead of the curve here on this show quite a bit. You guys were in here as well. We were pretty good with it. So a very quick look back at what we said, how we got it right. Yeah, it's a little bit of I told you so. It's the one time out of the year we're going to do something where we're kind of proud of it. But take a look at this, how this lawsuit went down. This dates our coverage all the way back to February. Putting it together, I was kind of interested to see our takes at the time as it went on. Settle this or fight this. Some people are saying fight it. I say settle it. Settle it, pay the money, do what Florida State did. It looked terrible for them, but they settled and just had a top 10 signing class. They're fine now. I settle it. What do you think, guys?
I don't think they settled. And the reason I think that is because of the firm that they hired. They hired a firm out of Nashville that is not inclined to settle. Now, it may be that they get into this thing and look at the evidence and say, you better settle this. But based on what I'm told and what they have, now Tennessee has settled others, but they haven't gone out and hired outside counsel to settle this. So I'm not sure they're not inclined to settle. They may have to, but they're not inclined to.
I think you got to get to the bottom of what's the truth here. And if you're in the right, I don't settle. And then if you do settle, you're talking about pay. How much do you pay? How much is that going to be?
Number yet.
Yeah, is that going to be $5 million? I mean, is it going to be $1 million per victim?
All right, so we got two people saying fight it.
Well,
what do you think, Mike?
I think right now Tennessee, if they act like they're going to settle, that's not in. I'd at least bluster like I wasn't going to settle.
Yeah, exactly.
I would definitely bluster like
Yeah, exactly.
When you and I talked about this a couple days ago, I was 100% settled. I'm now 75% settled. I've backed off of that just a little bit, and
Is that
I
bluster?
agree with.
Is that bluster on your part?
I agree. No, it wasn't bluster on my part. It was reason,
Okay.
well thought out
We
stuff.
got a minute, go.
So I would definitely push it to the limit before I settle.
Yes, but again, here's the thing. You want to talk about it dragging over into the fall and being talked about every single Saturday?
yeah.
Then fight it. If you don't want to hear it every single Saturday and you don't want it covered by Nancy Grace every night between now and next August, settle it.
Last week on the show, I was talking about my opinion about if I would settle or not, and I was 75% settle, 25% fight. Well, I think Tennessee has to get together with whoever the representation is and just say, can we make this thing go away somehow or another before the SEC media days roll around in July? Okay. If we can do it by litigating it, litigate it. If you can't make it go away by litigating it by July, then by golly, I'm settling it as fast as I can sit there and write little checks or big checks.
To put it in the Salem witch trials situation, like the crucible. If you tell me you're going to live as an outcast if you at least admit you're a witch, or you can keep your good name, say you're not a witch, and we'll kill you, I'm picking up my broom and I'm going somewhere else. Florida State and Baylor, like Tennessee, have been accused of not properly investigating sexual assaults. Both were sued. Both got tons of negative press. And in January, both settled out of court with their accusers. Just days later, in February, Florida State finished number 2 in the nation and Baylor finished number 17 in the nation in football recruiting. So if you think this is the end of the world, it's not. If UT settles, the bad press goes away and life goes on. If UT's case goes to trial, Butch Jones and other assistants will be deposed under oath. You can bank on it. And you do not want a coach under oath, period. Depending on the leniency of the judge, the plaintiff's attorney could ask all manner of embarrassing or dangerous questions that are tangentially related to the case.
I wish there had been a reasonable chance to reach a settlement before all this came about. What I've been told, there is not a reasonable chance that both parties are going to be willing to discuss a settlement. So that, to me, is off the table at this time.
We'll see. I think if you wanted to settle, you could probably get people back at the table, but yeah, I agree with it. If they had an opportunity to settle this ahead of time, and usually in these kind of cases you would get that, you get the blackmail call, you know.
The only thing I would have to add is if you've ever been on jury duty, and I haven't been in a jury room on a civil case like this, personally, my experience, I was horrified and dumbfounded by what I perceived to be the lack of logic in the jurors discussing this. So I'd be afraid to say anything to a jury.
The plaintiff's attorneys don't want to spend 3 years in litigation on this. And I was told by someone at UT that they're expecting 2 years minimum, 3 years probable in terms of how long this is going to go. They're, as we said a couple weeks ago, they're locusts. They want to make their money and move on to the next case that they settle out of court. But the problem is they're also, in terms of trying to get the jury ready if it does go to trial, in terms of getting them to say, there's just so much here, there's so much smoke, there has to be fire. But they're also, the more you trickle out, the more it makes Tennessee pop up in the press nationally, which looks worse and worse for Vols. And that, of course, ramps up the pressure on UT. But if you want to be informed on what's going on, here is the latest. Okay, first, we learned this week that Tennessee initially hired attorney Bill Ramsey back in June of 2015. The lawsuit was filed in February of this year. You might remember on February 28, I speculated early on that Tennessee was likely given an opportunity to settle up front, keep this out of court and out of the press. And I think the fact that they hired their attorney last June suggests that, yes, indeed, they knew this was coming, and they probably had an opportunity to nip this in the bud. All right. Last week, I asked the panel if anyone thought moving to the deposition stage of the Timeline lawsuit would make UT more open to a settlement. Hugh Freeze at Ole Miss has been dragged into a lawsuit down there, and he's doing everything he can to avoid giving a deposition because coaches don't want to be deposed. They don't want to be trapped in something that the NCAA can use against them. Well, after last Sunday's show, I got a call as I was walking in my house. Got a call, someone in the UT administration said, "You guys were right." That person told me they had heard the word settlement more times in that week, that meant leading up to last Sunday, than they had in the previous 2 months. So then yesterday, I'm flipping by volquest.com. I always check to make sure I haven't missed anything in the week. Brent Hubb's a good guy. And I see that VolQuest has a note about, well, there are certain circumstances where a settlement might be discussed.
Discussed.
Look, for months and months and months, all we'd heard was no settlement, no settlement, no settlement. Then you hit the deposition stage, and suddenly, little murmurs of, okay, possibly, maybe it could happen down the road. It's unlikely, but maybe. I think people are headed for a settlement, and they better be ready for it. There you go. We did a pretty good job. I mean, we caught a lot of that stuff ahead of time. One other thing that I didn't put in there, we said on an overtime segment back in March that, and I was told, I had an idea from a higher up over there, what the settlement might be. And I said on that overtime segment that the cost of the settlement could be less than the legal fees. And it turns out, what did Tennessee say when they settled for 2.4? The 2.48, they said, well, the legal fees could have been over 5. Mm-hmm. So congratulations to this panel and all the things that we were right on ahead of the time. And the bottom line is, the biggest thing we were right on is if you settle, it goes away.
And it's gone away.
It was off the ESPN.com front page 12 hours after you announce it. It didn't go from story 1 to story 5. It was gone. It wasn't on the homepage anymore. You pay it, you move on. Did they get it right, or should they have settled even sooner?
Yeah, the only issue I might have had was settling sooner. If you could have gotten it done before the lawsuit actually came out, that's what Tennessee should have done.
It's gone away for right now, but I guarantee you Butch Jones is somewhere in his office right now just praying that his players behave themselves, because if something were to happen, it all just bubbles up to the surface right again.
Well, whenever we get an update on the A.J. Johnson, rape cases, I think that Michael Williams, I think that's when it might resurface. But Butch Jones used it as an opportunity. The few times he was even asked about it in media days to say, hey, this never goes away. We lead the nation in education and that type of thing. Yeah.
I thought he had a really good answer with that as well. We're not done with this.
Right.
It's still there. But the thing is, in the main room, it was about the 10th question, and he got one question on it. And we said it from the week the thing was filed. Settle it, it goes away, as it did with Florida State. They settled it, it went away. So, all right, when we come back, we're going to talk about SEC predictions. We mentioned it earlier, they're kind of goofball. How much attention can you pay to them? And then a little later, we got a little game show going. We also want to talk about team leadership for Tennessee. Everybody's talking about that. Plenty more to come on the Sports Source. Come on back.